All right, we'll just let everyone join here. How's everyone doing tonight?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Hey, Michael in the house. How you doing, buddy?
Doing. How about you?
Doing great. Doing good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good to see some familiar faces.
Lots of familiar faces in here. Yeah. Hey, Jazz.
Hey, Cal, how you doing?
Doing well. Hey, Michael. Hey, Frank.
Hello.
Got a couple other folks I've talked to recently. Tanvir, Alejandro, how are you doing? Kenny, glad to have you here. I know we need to reconnect here. Glad to have you on, man.
Hey guys.
Hello,
Hey Cal.
Is it Ludi or Luddy? I just
Ludi.
wrong.
Ludi.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was Ludi. I just wanted to make sure. How are you doing, man?
Good, great. How are you?
Doing well. Good to
Awesome.
have you on. Makisha, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing well. How's the big 10-year-old doing in the background?
That's the 3-year-old.
Oh, the 3-year-old.
It's good to start early, I say. You know, 3 is a perfect time to learn how to do this.
Yeah, we get him on here. That's right. Awesome. Well, there's a couple more people here. We'll just let everyone roll in. I actually had a call from a kid. I think he was 16, and he wanted to get going in real estate, and he was wanting to know if he could start at age 16, and it was a really cool conversation. Yeah.
Man, when I was 16, that was not on my mind at all. I wish it
I
would.
know.
Can you imagine?
That's what I told him too.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. A couple more people here. I'm just joining in. All right. Hey, Grace, how are you doing? Hey, Nicole.
We got Michael Matthew in the house.
Yeah. Michael's my webinar backup man. He's like my research guy on the, on Sportscast, and someone's always looking up the stats.
Ah,
That's what Michael is for me.
it's good to have that.
It is. Yeah. All right.
And I have that amazing testimonial for you.
That's right. Michael sent me a Christmas card in one of our webinars for overages with my face and the Dallas characters, because we have the same last name, Ewing. It was pretty funny.
Yeah,
Taking over Texas again.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, we've got a great turnout tonight. That's great. Well, welcome everybody. Glad you could spend some time with us tonight learning about real estate. I guess a lot of people are in lockdown, so there's not a lot of other options than to learn, which is cool. So just like to welcome all of you first, and then welcome my guest, Mike Wolf. Some of you know him very well. Some of you might be the first time meeting Mike, but welcome, Mike.
Hey, good to be here. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah. So you're in Las Vegas,
Right now, I am in Las Vegas. I just did a TED Talk this past weekend, and
Cool.
yeah, things are open here. Well, I mean, the shows aren't going, but restaurants and things are open, and so it's good to be here, and not in Calgary where it's snowing and cold and locked down.
Which hotel are you at?
I'm at Caesar's Palace, so I got
Awesome.
kind of a bit of well, actually, it's more Greek than Roman, but we got some sort of theme going on behind me here.
Yeah. Well, I remember when we first did our first deal with you, you helped me get my first deal in the US, and you were staying there, and we were staying at what's the Japanese Imperial Palace across the street.
That's not even there anymore. They took that
Oh,
down.
really?
Now it's the link. That's gone.
Oh, well, you let us into the pool area though for Caesars, and that was really fun.
Yeah, they have a great pool here,
Yeah.
but it's not pool weather, unfortunately,
No.
but they do have great pools here for sure.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going to talk about tax deeds and liens. And for some of you, this might be brand new content. So Mike, do you want to just start off and just do your thing, and I'll chime in with my own experiences and that kind of stuff.
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'll explain what tax liens and deeds are. Well, first of all, I'll tell who I am for those of you who don't know me. I've been investing for about 31 years. I'm from Calgary in theory, but I'm very nomadic, and decided I'm not participating in winter or lockdown. So I'm in Vegas right now. I'm going to be probably heading to Mexico for the rest of the winter in a week or two. But investing full time. I started off in Canada 31 years ago in Calgary. Around 15 years ago, a buddy of mine moved from Calgary to Las Vegas, right here in Vegas. And I'd go visit him, and I noticed that the prices kept going up on real estate. So that was the beginning of my US real estate career. And once I started investing in the US, I never really looked back and never really invested in Canada again, because it's so much easier to do deals. And there's so many opportunities here that don't really exist in Canada, or they exist in Canada, but not to the same extent. And it's trickier. And anyway, so I become a really big fan of US investing, even though I'm a Canadian. And tax liens and deeds are something I didn't figure out till probably, must be 10, 11, 12 years now. It's relatively recent on my radar. And it's something that I kept hearing about. And every time I talk to different people, they tell me different things. Yeah, it's good, or no, it's too good to be true, or it doesn't exist. Anyway, so I decided I was going to figure this thing out and see if it was a good opportunity or not. And I remember, I picked up every book I could find on the topic. I took a few courses. And the more I delved into this, the more confused I got, because there's so much conflicting information. People said, oh, you can do this, you can do it this way, or you can do it that way. Anyway, to make a long story short, I made myself a human guinea pig and started to invest and just kind of figure out what was true and what was false. And so I'm going to dispel all the myths for you tonight. And so let's see. So first of all, what is a tax lien? Tax liens and tax deeds are two different things, first of all. They're kind of related, they're kind of cousins, but they're not the same thing. So first of all, the opportunity for both of those exists because the different counties across the United States, they use the property tax money, they use that for their police force, to keep their schools open, keep their hospitals open. And so when people don't pay their property taxes, the counties need this money to keep this stuff going. And so at some point, they're either going to auction off a house in the case of a tax deed. And for investors like us, it means, amazing opportunities to get properties potentially for pennies on the dollar. They don't all sell for pennies on the dollar. Some of them are great deals, some of them are bad deals, and we're going to talk about that. Oh, I got muted too there. So some of the counties will create what's called a tax lien, and some counties will create a tax deed. Now, tax lien, you're typically not buying a piece of real estate, just so you know. What you're buying in most counties. Now, remember, there's thousands of counties all across the US. So I'm speaking in generalizations here. Some counties will do things a little differently than others. But in general, when you buy a tax lien, you're not buying a piece of property. You're buying what's called, in most cases, a TLC, tax lien certificate. So let's go through an example here. Let's say, we'll pick on Cal for a second here. Cal does not pay his property taxes. He gets something in the mail saying your taxes are due on June 1st. If you don't pay it, there's going to be a penalty. And let's say that penalty will make up a number, 20%. So Cal owes $1,000. June 1st comes and goes. Cal doesn't make that payment. And now the county sends him a letter saying, okay, you were late. Instead of $1,000, you now owe us $1,200. Now, unbeknownst to Cal, the county, if it was a lien state, the county's not going to go and put the home up for auction. They're just going to add a penalty, but they still need that money. They can't call the chief of police and say, yeah, we'll pay you. We're just waiting for Cal to pay his property taxes. They can't do that. They need that money right now. So because I see Austin on the screen here, good to see you, buddy. Austin, being a really smart investor, says to the county, you know what, I'll give you that $1,000 that Cal owes. And when Cal finally goes to pay, you send me the $1,200. So that's what you're doing. When you buy a tax lien certificate, you're buying that extra penalty or that interest. You're paying the face value, which is what Cal owes. And then you're going to get all that money back plus whatever Cal pays above that to the county. And that amount can vary considerably from place to place. I think the highest one, I think there's a state that's like 36%. There's a lot of states where it starts off really high, but they get bid down. It's called bidding down the interest rate. So it might start 18%. And then somebody will say, I'll do it for 16%. Somebody will do it for 8%. And the problem is in a lot of places, it's very competitive. And quite often, like in places like Florida, for example, it's extremely competitive. And quite often there's institutional investors there, meaning that you're competing against banks. And a bank, they take our money in and give us like less than 1% interest. So if they can make 2%, if they bid it down to 2%, they could still make a profit because they're borrowing that money from us for very, very little money. So there are opportunities though to get these tax liens and still get a good rate of interest. There's a second piece to that though, to that equation, and that's that, okay, so let's say Cal never pays that tax. A year's gone by, now another year goes by, and every county has what's called a redemption period. And that's kind of the last day that Cal can go and make that payment. If he doesn't do that, then Austin, because he bought that certificate, Austin's in a position where he can go and foreclose on Cal and now take the property. So I don't know if you guys are all old enough like I am to remember, there used to be like an infomercial that come on late at night and somebody would say, I bought this house, this beautiful home for $500. And that's what it was. They were buying a tax lien certificate that the person never redeemed it in time for, you know, the end of the redemption date. And they got what at least appeared to be a smoking deal on the property. Now, so that's a good side of tax liens. The downside is a lot of times the reason people aren't paying property taxes is there's something really majorly wrong with a property. And they actually, they want somebody else to take on that liability. Meaning imagine there is a piece of land and it was contaminated. There used to be a gas station on it. The land is now contaminated, and to get that back up to code, it's going to cost you $50,000 or $100,000. And you didn't do your homework, you didn't do any due diligence. You just thought, oh well, it's $500. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is you end up getting liability for whatever you're buying. You now, as the owner, with ownership comes liability. And so the problem with tax liens, from my perspective, is that you usually don't make enough money to really afford to do a whole lot of due diligence on it. And if you actually end up getting the property, which doesn't happen very often, it happens maybe 2 to 3% of the time where you're going to end up getting that, adopting that property, taking it over. But if you haven't done the homework, if you haven't done your due diligence and there's a problem with that property, once you foreclose and take ownership, you now take on all the liability that's associated with that property. So tax liens, I have one friend of mine who makes a lot of money and he's buying it directly from the county. He's buying in bulk. He does very, very well. He's got like a whole legal team and he deals with all the issues that come up. Most people I know don't get rich off of tax liens because most of the tax liens are for small amounts. You know, if you get a $500 tax lien, even if you get 20% on it, you know, that 500 turns into 600. It's okay. It's better than you're going to get at the bank. But unless you're doing a lot of volume, you're not really going to get rich from it. A better idea.
Interject with an example, Mike.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I have a friend, he's a tech guy, he's in IT, and he's actually a Canadian as well. He buys tax liens in Arizona and they have a sale once a year. And so he'll look at thousands of properties and in order to be profitable, he came up with some sort of algorithm that would look at all of them and they would bid zero interest. So if they redeem, he doesn't make any money, but they're looking for ones they think would foreclose and they're only trying to get the property.
Smart.
But he used all this, I don't know what kind of algorithms and stuff to figure this out. But yeah, he's got a big operation.
Yeah, well, that's way over my head, so I can't teach you the
Right.
algorithms.
Same.
But I will give you some good news. There's another thing that happens. So some counties, they're going to do liens, and that's fine. I don't really particularly like dealing with liens. But then there's other counties, and these are usually counties that have a little bit more money, so they don't need that money right away. A lien is a really quick solution for the county because they can do that right away. They're not taking the property away from anybody, but they're getting that money that they need. And they're just foregoing the interest and the penalties, and they're giving that to whoever wants to buy the tax lien certificate. Now, for counties that are a little bit richer, that say, hey, we don't need this money right away. We can wait 2 or 3 years. But, you know, if those 2 and 3 years go by and Cal doesn't make his payment, well, now we're going to put his home up on the auction block. That's a whole different ball game. And I love tax deeds a lot better than I like tax liens. So with that, you are going to have to do some homework and some due diligence because once again, with ownership comes liability. So whatever you're buying, you're going to be responsible for that. And there's some pitfalls. Now, normally when you buy a tax deed, you get the property immediately. That's your property. If you're the high bidder, that's your home. And normally what happens is all the mortgages and all the liens disappear. Now, I said usually. And so there are exceptions to that. And if you don't know what those exceptions are, it can get you in really big trouble. So tax deeds are a really great strategy if you know what you're doing. It's a very dangerous strategy if you have not done your due diligence or if you don't know the due diligence. So I'll give you an example. not that long ago, I think this was maybe a year and a half ago, there was somebody who it was in Fort Lauderdale, I believe, and they thought they had got this villa. I think their bid was $9,000 or $10,000 on this villa that they thought was maybe worth around $250,000. And it turns out that there were two villas that were attached, and between them, there was a strip of land that was 100 feet long and about 1 foot wide. And that's actually what they were bidding on, and they didn't realize that. And that's what they won. And the person who won actually tried to sue the county and said, well, you had a picture of the really nice property. You didn't show the picture. It didn't show that little strip of land. The bottom line is that they didn't win the lawsuit, because before you bid, you're going to get a list from somewhere of what properties are going up for auction. And on that list, there's going to be a disclaimer saying what you see is what you get, and you have no recourse. If you can't come back and give back the property, and even if we have the wrong picture, even if we put a picture of the wrong house, you have no recourse. So it's buyer beware. And so there's different things that you need to do in order to protect yourself before you go shopping at these auctions. But I can tell you that once you know what you're doing, I've had one student, he picked up a home probably worth $90,000 to $100,000 for $7,200. I know Cal got several properties. I don't know if you want to show those examples of the ones that you got.
Sure.
I know you got one for what, 13? Was it 13,000?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen here. And I can show you guys. I put them in our Facebook group, so you may have seen some of these already, but this is the first one I got in Houston, actually after learning from Mike how to do all this. And so we ended up paying $35,000 for this one. And as Mike said, what you see is what you get. And sometimes you can't see anything because you can't get in the property. But this one, the back door was kicked in. And so kids were playing around in it, and they spray painted the walls. And so we were actually able to walk in and see it. So we knew what we were getting, and we were able to set our bid accordingly. But yeah, so this one we paid $35,000 for it. And I've got kind of a before picture of the kitchen. And we ended up putting in about $45,000 in it in holding costs and repairs. And then in Texas, there's a redemption period where the owner can actually get the property back if they pay the investor money. And Mike, I'm sure you'll talk about that a bit.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. So we had to wait until that redemption period was over before we could sell it as a flip. And so we ended up renting it out for a year, and then finally we sold it as a flip. And so we ended up selling it for 121, and we made about 46,000 on it. So that was a good one. And then this other one I actually paid 11,000 for. And Marie, who's in attendance here, I just saw you come in, Marie. Hello. We actually did a deal together on this one, and we paid 11,000 at the auction. And this is the job that Marie took the reins on this one. And this is the remodel at the bottom of what they did with this. But it had a little bit of fire damage. And so you can see by that one window at the top there on the left, there's like smoke and it's kind of brownish, and that was fire damage. And so that's how we were able to get it so cheap. But the damage wasn't that bad. And so it turned out just fine. And that one's rented for $11.20 a month. So those are some good
That's
ones.
a nice return on a I guess $61,000 investment.
Mm-hmm.
It's great rent. Yeah. So as Cal alluded to, so you have the liens. You have some counties that are liens. You have some that are deeds, and then there's actually kind of a hybrid, and that's called redeemable deeds. And my personal favorite market is I love Texas. I know Marie, who's on this call, she also is. I think she's more in Dallas. Good to see you, by the way. But my favorite personally, my favorite auction takes place in Houston, in Texas. And Texas is a redeemable deed state. So what that means is that if you're the high bidder, just like in other deed states, you get that property, but there's a 6-month redemption period. And what that means is that for 6 months after you've purchased this property, the previous owner can come back and buy the home back off of you. But for them to do that, they've got to give you a 25% premium. So in the case of where Cal got the property for $35,000, if the person who previously owned it wanted to redeem it, they'd have to give them 25% over and above the $35,000 plus any eligible expenses. Now, what an eligible expense is anything that you did to the property to make it livable. So if you had to replace the roof, that's an eligible expense. If you had to change carpets, paint it. Those are all eligible expenses. Now, on the other hand, if you went and put like a $500,000 chandelier in there thinking I'm going to make 25% on it, that's not an eligible expense. So it has to be something that is necessary. If you're going to rent the property, it has to be necessary to make it rentable. If it's obviously leaking and you have to fix the roof, those are all eligible. If you're putting in fancy stuff just because you think you're going to get a 25% profit on it, don't do that because you're going to lose your money and you're not going to, you better remove that chandelier before they take the property back. So, so those are things, those are basically the three different types of, tax liens and deeds that you're going to see: straight liens, straight deeds, redeemable deeds. By the way, Hawaii is a redeemable deed state. So if you ever need, and I'm not an accountant, we do have a few on the call here though. Disclaimer, I'm not an accountant. Don't play one on TV. However, I will say that if you happen to take a trip to Hawaii around the time of the auction and you need a few days to do your research, I'm not saying if you're on the beach that's not eligible for a tax break, but you might want to check with your accountant. So that's a great thing.
Wi-Fi on the beach, you could be looking at your property list though.
You can be absolutely be doing your homework on the beach. So, but that's kind of the basics. The things that you really need to know is a lot of the stuff that, like I said, a lot of the information out there was conflicting and a lot of it was false. Like, for example, I remember one of the courses I took, they said, you can do this from the comfort of your own home. Well, you can. If you want to lose money, you can do whatever you want from the comfort of your own home. The problem is that, you have to drive by these properties. And a lot of these homes look really good in the pictures. What they teach you in some of the courses is that, you can just go on Google Earth and take a look at the property, what it looks like. Well, who knows when that picture was taken? And I can tell you, when a property's been sitting vacant for a little while, people will break in, and sometimes you'll have squatters in there. I do 4-day trainings where I actually take people to Texas and we actually go look. We spend a couple of days in the classroom. We spend one day where we drive around looking at the properties, and I've seen stuff that looked phenomenal on the computer, and then we got there and they're like smoldering ashes where the house used to stand. And so once again, what you see is what you get. So if you bought the smoldering ashes thinking you got yourself this beautiful palace, well, guess what? You're going to be in for a very expensive surprise. So one of the things that I've done is I built a team in Texas. I don't live in Texas. I built a team in Houston, and instead of me flying down there and going to the auction, my team will actually go to the auction on my behalf and for all my students. And Cal, I don't know if you were actually going to the auction yourself or if you had the team go and bid for you.
A little bit of both.
Okay, so the good news is I've taught people from as far away as Australia, and you don't have to fly to Texas every single month. Somebody else can represent you at these auctions, but you definitely have to have boots on the ground in some way, shape, or form. Because like I said, if you're just looking at pictures on the internet, you could be in for a really big shock at the end of the auction. The other thing you have to, I want to caution you on is, I remember at pretty much every auction, I see homes going for more than market value, not even more than what people should be paying, but over the actual price that if they bought it on the MLS, they could have got it cheaper. Because people get excited. They go to an auction and it's competitive and everybody's, hands are raising and it's really fast. And it's easy to get caught up in the hype. And so I remember there was one auction in particular. There's a home that my students and I, we decided the maximum bid should be $90,000 on it. And I remember somebody ended up bidding it up to like 140, 150, something like that. And then I asked the person afterwards, this wasn't one of my students, I said, hey, congratulations on winning, for, let's call it 140. What did you like about this property? He goes, well, I went on Zillow and it says it was worth, 170. So I think I got this really good deal. Don't rely on Zillow to figure out the value of a property. So another thing I want to teach you is that you've got to have, once again, you got to have some people on your team that can tell you the value of the properties that you want to bid on. If you're relying on Zillow, I'm sure that guy lost his shirt on that property. There's no way he would have made a profit because it's worth nowhere near what Zillow said it was. And so you have to be really careful that you know what you're bidding on. You have to know what the value is. And you also have to, it's good to have a clear exit strategy. If you're going to rent it, you might be able to bid a little bit higher for it than if you're going to flip it. If you're going to flip it really quickly, you have to have a pretty good spread from what you're paying for it to what you're selling it for. And so if you're renting it, if the numbers might work, even if you pay market value, it might still work. It's kind of a bad way. If you're looking to pay market value, that's a really bad way to buy properties. It's much easier to go on the MLS if you're going to pay market value, because at least you know what you're getting. There's a lot more checks and balances in place. But if you're looking for a smoking deal, and you're looking to get stuff below market value, and you do your homework, it's a great way to make some money. The other thing I like to tell people is that you will not be the only person at the auction. It is very, very competitive. But if you're consistent with it, like Cal, you will get properties, but you might go like 2, 3, sometimes 4 months, get nothing. And then the next month you'll get 2, maybe. I had one student pick up 3 in 1 month. So, but I've also had students, bid and get nothing. And so you just have to really be consistent with it. Here's the good news is that right now there in the United States, there's a moratorium on foreclosures. So that means that the banks and the counties aren't foreclosing on anybody currently. They're not allowed to. I think that ends the end of January unless it gets extended again. So, and the auction my favorite auction, I believe it's been closed now for 7 or 8 months.
Yeah.
And on any given month, there's both the tax deeds. There's also bank foreclosures that change hands at this one particular auction. And on any given month, we'll see, sometimes 500, 1,000 homes change hands. So multiply that by the number of months that auction's been shut down. And then you add in all the homes that would have got foreclosed on, but because of the moratorium haven't. And there's going to be a lot of inventory coming up. And of course, a lot of people right now, they're not working. And so I believe the competition will be lower than normal and the number of properties will be higher than normal. And so we're going to see a lot of opportunity coming down the pipeline, as things start to open up again. The other thing I wanted, is it okay, Cal? I'm not sure if you wanted to ask questions or if you want me to keep teaching, but there's...
Yeah, well, if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in or even put them in the chat. We can address them, right? If you're fine with that.
But one of the things that I like to do differently, most people that do the tax deeds, they look at they get the list. By the way, it's published online when the auction's open, of course. And they look at the list, they do their homework, and then they go to the auction, and sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. I like to take that list and do what I call the trifecta of real estate. And what I mean by that is, so when you look at that list, that's a list of people that are in trouble. That's a list of people who in 3 to 4 weeks are about to lose their home for usually a very small amount of money. Like we've seen, the opening bid is sometimes $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, meaning that these people literally are going to lose their home over $5,000. And so when I see that list, to me, that's an opportunity. These are people that need help. And so, back in the day, back in 2007, this is before, before I even knew how to do this probably just before I was actually learning how to do the tax deeds. I started up a company called Foreclosure Fixers. And Foreclosure Fixers, how you guys get those, you've probably seen those postcards, maybe you even send them out yourself. Those postcards, we buy homes, we buy ugly homes, we pay cash for homes. Instead, I would send out marketing materials that said I could help stop the foreclosure. And what I found is, if somebody's behind like $5,000, there's 2 types of people that would call on my ads. There's people that, sometimes bad things happen to good people. They're getting a divorce, they got sick, they lost their job. Well, when they lose their job, they can't, these are people that normally, they wouldn't dream of not making their payments. But suddenly you lose your job, what are you going to do? You can't get blood from a stone. So sometimes bad things happen to good people. And people like that, quite often I just loan them the money, stop the foreclosure, and help them stay in their home, and then they'd pay me back in installments. But then there's a second type of person, and these are people that typically like to keep up with the Joneses. They usually buy a way more expensive home than they can afford. They have the fancy, they have everything that they have is beyond really what they should be having, but they're living off of credit. And people like that, you don't want to loan the money, because if you do that, you will never see that money again. They're not going to be able to afford to pay you back. So with the first group of people, they lost their job. Well, now they're working again. They can't, they don't have the money to make up the arrears, but they can make the monthly installments. The second group of people, they can't afford to pay you or the mortgage, and you're just giving them a Band-Aid. And once that once they go through the Band-Aid, they're going to need another Band-Aid. And people like that, I would give them what I call a soft landing. And by soft landing, what I mean is I'd always make sure that these people, I would buy their house off them in a lot of cases, and I'd always make sure that they had money for a damage deposit and several months rent, money for food, and I leave them in a better position than when I found them, in a much better position than if they lost their home to the bank or the county. And so I could have made a lot more money. These people are desperate. I could have got a home run and offered them nothing and left them and not even care about where they end up. But what I found is, one, I slept a lot better at night. But two, these people would tell their friends. If they lost their job, chances are they worked with a bunch of other people that lost their job. And so now, instead of having one client, they send me 5 or 10, 10 of their friends are in the same position they're in. And so made a little bit less per deal, but did a lot of deals. So the first part of the trifecta is pre-foreclosure, people that are in trouble, haven't lost their home yet. And there's a bunch of other solutions. You could potentially say, hey, instead of losing your home, why don't we fix it up? I'll put up the cash, we'll sell it. And when we sell it, obviously I'm putting up the cash, so I obviously want to make a profit on my money, but you'll at least walk away with something, and you're not going to be, left with nothing. And so there's a lot of different solutions for these people. And so that's the first part of the trifecta. You can deal with the pre-foreclosure part of it and try to help these people and create a win for them and a win for you. The second part is what most people do, and they go to the auction and bid, and that's cool. That's awesome. And you can get smoking deals. We saw some of the ones that Cal got. And then there's a third part, and that's something called overages, which is something Cal's also become an expert at as well. And an overage, at that auction, if the opening bid is $5,000 and a property sells for $50,000, the first $5,000 that belongs to the county fair and square. The additional $45,000 that actually belongs to the previous homeowner, and most of these homeowners have no clue this money is owed to them. So a really cool strategy is to track them down, let them know, hey, I know somebody owes you $45,000. If you're willing to share part of that with me, and you get to decide, you get to negotiate with that, how much that is. Could be 20%, 30, 40, whatever you guys negotiate. But you can say to them, hey, I'm willing to help you get that money. I'll do all the work. You only pay me if I'm successful. Cal actually takes it a step further, gives them 10% of their money up front, which I think is awesome. But now you've taken somebody who, they just lost their home over a very small amount of money. They're broke. And now you get them this big lump sum of cash. That is a game changer for them. The best thing about that strategy is it requires not a whole lot of cash. I won't say no money, but very little money, relatively speaking. And it's a great win-win. And so when you do that trifecta, you're taking the same group of people potentially, and whether you win or lose at the auction, whether you are able to help them before, whether they're in pre-foreclosure, there's still that third opportunity called overages. And so this is if somebody wanted to make this their full-time career, just doing that, that would be a very lucrative career, I would say. What do you think, Cal? If somebody did those 3 things, or even one of them really well?
Yeah, oh, I think so. And, you've got enough time, because they usually happen monthly, or not even sometimes, every 3 months or something. You've got time to prepare, get ready for it, and then go at it. I'm going to take that one step further, though. And if you are the kind of person that likes to wholesale houses, everyone that's at those auctions, they come with cash. Okay. So if they're bidding, they're cash buyers. And whether you're buying auction properties and then wholesaling them off to other investors later, or you're finding your own deals, not from the auction, but elsewhere, all these people have cash at these auctions. So you can go there and, put on like something on the windshields of all the cars saying, hey, we buy houses. And then also what I was doing is actually putting signs. So you've got the auction list, putting signs on the properties that say that, wholesaler looking for cash buyers or something like that. Because all these cash buyers are driving around at all these auction properties. They'll call you looking for deals, and then suddenly you've grown your buyers list just by using that auction list. So
yeah, great strategy.
Lots of ways to use it. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Those are really great strategies. Very smart. Does anybody have any questions before we go on? I want to make sure that everybody understands this, and I try to really make it plain English so that you don't have to be like, longtime real estate investor to understand it. So I hope you all understand it. No questions so far. I just want to, that's all clear. I'll talk about the problem with tax deeds right now is that some of the auctions are open from what I hear. My favorite ones are not at the moment. But here's the thing, for those of you who are listening, there are a lot of other strategies right now you could be doing in the meantime. So if you've been thinking about jumping into real estate investing and you're not already investing in real estate, I wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to wait when that auction opens. That auction might open in 6 months, might be a 1 month, 2 months, a year. We don't know. There's obviously a lot of things up in the air right now, but there are so many strategies right now that that you can do right now, even if you're locked down, even if you're one of those people in Ontario where you have a stay-at-home order, this is stuff you can do from your computer. So there's so much opportunity right now, and it's going to get a lot better. Now things are, in all fairness, there's not nearly as many properties on the market yet as there normally are. Right now we have a shortage because a lot of people don't want people walking through their home because of the COVID. But we have this massive opportunity coming down the pipeline, and I believe there will be a lot of pre-foreclosures coming up. We're going to see a really big transfer of wealth coming up here. It's hard to say exactly when, but once that moratorium on foreclosures ends, that's going to create a ripple effect. The governments are not going to continue to send free money to people. Those stimulus checks are eventually going to end, and the government's trying to prop up the markets and keep things going, but that's not going to last forever. And there's going to be some pretty big fallout. You can't shut down the global economy and expect that things are going to be as you left them. That's just not going to happen. And so for anybody who's thinking of becoming a real estate investor, this is a great time to do it. And there's things like wholesaling. Wholesaling is basically putting a property under contract. And if you don't have a whole lot of money, because I know some of you are saying, oh, I don't have a lot of cash. Well, tax deeds are awesome for that because they tend to go for quite a bit below market value. But wholesaling is something that requires very little, sometimes almost no cash. So once again, we'll pick on Cal. Let's say Cal's in trouble and Cal says, listen, I got this property, I've got to sell it. I'm desperate. I can't make the payments anymore. And let's say it's worth $200,000 and Cal's willing to let it go for $100,000. Well, then you call up another, we'll pick on Austin again, because I keep seeing him in my little bubble screen there. Austin, you go to Austin because he's a really successful real estate investor. You say, hey, Austin, I got this property and there should be $100,000 equity in it. If you're willing to pay me $20,000, I'll assign that contract to you. So what that means is now you've put this home under contract. You don't have the money to do it. You don't have that $100,000 or the ability to get that money from anywhere. You sell it to Austin. You let him go do that deal. If he goes makes $100,000, you get paid that $20,000 whether he goes and makes $100,000, or if Austin totally blows it and loses money, you still get to keep that $20,000. So that's one way to do a deal with very, very little cash. There's strategies such as if you're in Canada, called agreement for sale. If you're in the US, it's called subject to, and you're taking over somebody's existing mortgage. Quite often you can do that with, especially when there's no equity, you can take it over with zero down. Let's say the mortgage payment's $1,000 and the home rents for $1,500. You can take over that home with zero money and get yourself $500 a month in cash flow, just as an example. So there's tons of different strategies right now that you can be doing while you're waiting for these tax deed auctions to open up. Hopefully they open soon. I'm chomping at the bit, but there's so many different ways to make money in real estate.
And the reason I wanted to have this conversation now is because of that backlog that's waiting to happen. So I don't want you guys to think that we're telling you a strategy that we can't even do, because I think it's going to open up soon. And we want people to be ready for that opportunity. And, whether that's preparing and learning or, getting your cash ready or whatever it might be, because there's a big opportunity. And there's already smaller counties that are having auctions. It just seems like those big cities where they get big turnouts, they're trying to keep the social distancing. So that's why I think one of the reasons they're not having them right now.
Yeah, and some places, they only have the auction once a year, and some places are a few times a year. And the Houston one is once every month. It's on the first Tuesday of every month normally. So before you get into the whole bidding process and going to the auctions, make sure you know when they take place, where they take place, where you get the list from, things like that. And it will vary from place to place. Like how you do this strategy will vary sometimes slightly, sometimes in a bigger way. For example, you want to know what they take for payment. In Houston, you can only pay two ways. One is literally real cash, like bills, and you see people with briefcases filled with money, or what do they call cashier's checks. And so if you're Canadian, it has to be drawn on a U.S. bank, by the way, because there's a lot of Canadians on here. It has to be drawn on a U.S. bank in U.S. funds. And the other thing you need to know is you're not going to get your change back immediately, because there's obviously a lot of people trying to pass counterfeit, all kinds of counterfeit stuff. And so if you bought a property for if you did what Cal did, got one for 13,000 and you had a cashier's check for 20,000, you're not going to get that 7,000 change back, usually for 6 to 8 weeks, which means that if you need that other money to participate in the next month's auction, you want to have exact change. So if you're doing cashier's checks, get yourself, a $10,000 one, $5,000 one, bunch of $1,000 cashier's checks, so you can make as close to exact change as possible. Otherwise, your money might be tied up for a little bit and you might end up missing out on an opportunity. So any questions? You guys are like, either I like explained it so well and you guys are experts at this, or you're shy, and that happens too. I know people get shy. So you can either raise your hand or put something in the chat box, or Cal and I will just continue on.
Well, I got a story talking about due diligence. We heard, there's 4 of us that got together and we saw the list for the Topeka, Kansas auction from the year before. And Topeka is, I guess it's the capital city of Kansas. I'd never even heard of it until that year. But we saw their list and the properties were selling at about 50% or lower of value the previous year. And so there's 4 of us, we got all excited and we put all our funds together and we flew to Topeka, Kansas. And so this is an auction that happens just once a year. Okay. So that you only have one shot at it. And there were quite a few properties. And so we spent 3 or 4 days looking around, figuring out, what properties we liked and what our bids would be and that kind of thing. We found a realtor to help us. And as we went to the auction, all the properties that we ended up wanting either got removed before the auction because the owners found a way to pay the taxes, or we just got outbid because we wanted to be very conservative and not overbid in a market we didn't even really know. But one thing of caution when you're at the auction, and you alluded to this already, is just because you're there does not mean you have to bid on something. And we saw that there are these subdivisions that were being auctioned off. So these were empty lots, and there was actually 2 different subdivisions that they were working on before the market crash in 2010. So they were developing these new areas, and then the developer lost all their money and stopped building. And so we saw the first subdivision, each lot would get auctioned off one at a time. And we saw that the first one would go really, really cheaply. And then each successive lot would get bid higher and higher and higher. So we waited for the next subdivision to go on the auction block. And we all decided that we would just bid like really low and be the first ones to bid. And we had not looked at these lots. We were just there and we were disappointed that we flew all that way and didn't come home with anything. So we bid, I think we bid about $500 and we got 3 of these lots, all of us together, 3 of these lots. And we were all excited because we got 3 lots. We went to after the auction, we went there and looked at them and we made some signs, for sale signs and that kind of thing. So we thought, wow, this is great. We can at least at a minimum double our money, if not way more. And what we found out later, talking about due diligence, is the reason that no one wanted these lots is because they had a few houses in these subdivisions that had all the utilities and plumbing and infrastructure hooked up. But in order to pay for all of it, they needed to charge all of the property owners, even the vacant lot owners, this extra tax. So we had to pay, I think, $2,000 or more in extra tax beyond the regular property tax for each lot. And so suddenly a great deal turned out to be a coming headache that we had to deal with if we couldn't sell them before this tax was due. So it just goes to show, like, just because you're there doesn't mean you have to bid, and never bid on anything without doing your due diligence, because I think we all lost like $300 each or something, but like it could have been a disaster if we got really crazy and bid on something, really expensive. So it just goes to show that do your due diligence and don't bid stupidly just because you're there. So,
we see that a lot. It's so easy to get caught. One, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement.
yeah.
And, because I've obviously trained a lot of people, and some of them, when they go to bid for themselves, they either, let's say their maximum bid is 10,000. Well, then it goes to 10,100. They go, oh, maybe just a little bit higher. And then it's 10,000. Next thing you know, they're bidding, 15, 20,000 on anyway. You do your homework and your due diligence in a calm way, where there's no hype around, excitement. And then sometimes when you get into that excitement, you start not listening to your own advice and your own numbers. So don't do that. And then the other thing that sometimes happens is some people do their homework and they figure out their maximum bid. And then they get to the auction, they just freeze and they actually don't bid at all because they start to question, oh, did I do that right? Did I do that? And then they freeze. So one of the big advantages to having somebody there bidding for you is that he has there's no emotion for him. He's there totally just, he's like a robot. You say maximum bid 10,000. When it gets to 10,000, he stops. And that's the best way to bid, is just stick to your guns. If you came up with a number, you came up with that number for a reason. And so don't stop shy of that, but don't go, above and beyond that, or it gets you into trouble. And we see that, so often. And then the other advantage is Brian, who's my bid by proxy guy. He's been to pretty much every auction for like the last 10 or 11 years. And so he knows who your competitors are. He knows their bidding style. He knows when they're going to stop bidding. He kind of knows what they're looking for. And so that's a huge competitive advantage over going there by yourself, because you're not going to have any of that information. And so it's really it's kind of our secret weapon. But these are different things that I see all the time. I see people going crazy and just and they don't want, I flew all the way here, I don't want to come home empty handed. Well, sometimes the best deal that you do is a deal that you don't do. So and I've seen so many of my students though, when after the training, they go and they keep bidding after they were supposed to stop, or they'd bid on a property that they never even did the due diligence on, and I have to like pull their hand down. And so be really careful. Don't let your emotions get the best of you when you go. And when you're an investor, you got to be super what's the right word here? You just got to stick to your guns and do exactly what you were thinking of doing in the first place before you got into that crazy environment where it's very competitive. And getting a property isn't always winning. Getting a property that's going to make you money is winning. Getting a property where you're going to lose money, there's a lot of other things you can do with that money that are a lot more fun than buying a home and taking a loss on it. So don't do that.
Well, do you want to talk a little bit about your tour? Obviously, you don't have anything scheduled, but just kind of how that works.
Yeah, well, usually I do. Yeah, usually pre-COVID, I was doing 2 trainings a year, and I take people we'd actually go live to Houston, Texas, and the first couple of days are in classroom training, and I teach tax liens, tax deeds, overages. I usually bring in some guest speakers. We talk about some other investing topics as well. And then we'll actually, as a group, it's a workshop. We actually take out our laptops. We go through the list of properties are going for auction and figure out which ones make sense, which, at least on paper, which ones make sense to bid on. And then the next day we drive around the city looking at these homes. The ones, we kind of make a short list. We go drive by as many as we can. Sometimes if there's a way to get into the property without having to break any windows or do anything crazy, we'll do that. Sometimes we can't, because sometimes we're a little conspicuous looking with 20 people on a bus, all looking at somebody's home. So we carefully sometimes go inside a property or two, and we figure out, hey, it looked really good on paper. Does this property make sense based on what we're seeing here? And if so, what is it going to cost to fix up this home? Okay, now we know we can, our maximum bid to buy it is X amount, but how much more money are we going to need after the fact to rehab this property? And so these are the things that we discuss as a group as we drive around the city. And then on day 4, we actually go to the live auction together, and it's a bit of a zoo in there. It's a lot better than it used to be when I first taught you, Cal. It was outside in a parking lot, or just outside the courthouse. Yeah. And now they got some pretty fancy accommodations for it. It takes place in a convention center. There's TV screens letting you know what home is up for auction. So it's gotten pretty fancy over the years, and it's a lot warmer too. And you have coffee.
It was chaos before.
It was definitely chaos before, but it's really a fun experience. And so, I don't have any dates for live trainings for that. I may consider doing it over Zoom. I'm not sure, because I think a lot of the fun is going to the auction. If I do it over Zoom, anybody who signs up for that will also be able to come to the live event whenever that is allowable, whenever we can get, when people are comfortable getting on airplanes and being in groups together. So we can't predict when that's going to be. But that's how the training works. And, this year, instead, what I've decided to do in the meantime, it's like I said, there's a whole bunch of other strategies that make a lot of sense right now that you can do while you're waiting. So if you're one of those people that right now is in transition, maybe you lost your job, you've always kind of thought about doing real estate, but you didn't really know how to get started. Now's a great time to get started. I think 2021 is going to be the best year ever to be a real estate investor. We'll find out pretty soon, but I can't imagine a time in history that will be as lucrative as what's coming up. And so I've decided I'm going to do my next 3-day training, March 12th to 14th. It's all over Zoom, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home. And the first time I did it, this is actually my fourth time doing it. The first time I did it, it was $997. And I got really good feedback and people loved it. But I had a few people say, Mike, I lost my job. $997 is a lot of money for me right now. And so I decided to reduce the price because I want people to be able to afford it and be able to, I don't want people to have to take food off their table in order to learn how to be an investor. So it's $97 for all 3 days. And I've got some great guest speakers. One of them is named Cal Ewing, as a matter of fact. I've got several awesome speakers teaching on different topics. We'll be teaching wholesaling, flipping, a whole bunch of strategies. Most of them, when I started 31 years ago, I was broke. I was a starving ex-university student trying to pay off student loans. And so a lot of the strategies that I've learned are all stuff you can do on a shoestring budget, because I did not have deep pockets when I first started in this industry. And so it's $97, 3 days. I'm teaching all my best stuff. Well, actually, I forgot, for Cal's people, we're doing this for $1 for 3 days. So you don't even have to pay the $97, $1 for 3 days. And I'm going to be teaching a whole bunch of strategies you can do with little or no down. We'll be talking about, like I said, wholesaling and foreclosures, pre-foreclosures. I'm going to explain exactly how I did my foreclosure fixers business, where we help people in pre-foreclosure, and how you can emulate that. And we're going to talk a little bit about tax liens and deeds. That's a 4-day training in itself, so obviously I can't teach the whole thing, but we'll go a little, quite a bit deeper on that topic than we did tonight. And I'd love to see you all there. I know I've got quite a few of my students actually here in the room, so I'm excited to see you guys, and I'd love to get some more students. And this stuff, I believe if you apply the stuff that you learn, it'll be life-changing for you. So I know that real estate's been amazing for me. And Cal, how long have you been my student? Like we first met how many years ago?
I think we met in the 1800s or something like that.
I think so. That's right. I don't think we even
2010 or 2009, I think, is when we met.
And you actually came my training back then. I was actually taking people right here in Vegas, and I was showing you how to go to the auctions.
Right in Vegas is when we first did it. Yeah.
And I remember when I first met Cal, you were still in school getting your geology degree, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And you were just kind of getting into, you're thinking you wanted to get into real estate investing, and now you've retired from geology and you've been a full-time investor for quite a while. So, and I inspired you to leave Canada and invest in the US like I'm doing. So
right. I was trying to make it work here and it just wasn't working. And then, I followed your lead, and it's worked out really well. So, I started with your Vegas stuff, and then I took the tax deed tour, and I haven't looked back since. So that was really what started it off for me. So
yeah, well, the one thing I'll say about Cal, by the way, is that he is a go-getter. Like if I give him homework and I say do A, B, and C, Cal will do A, B, C, D, E, and F, and he is an overachiever, and he is extremely successful as a result of it. So I'm going to teach you my best stuff, but you have to apply it. If you don't apply it, you'll have wasted $1. So go take the stuff that I teach you and actually go and put it into use. And this stuff is, I don't know, I wish I knew this 31 years ago, because I have made a lot of mistakes in those 31 years that I could have avoided had I had a mentor early on. But I was really young and foolish back then, and thought I knew it all until I lost a lot of money, and then realized that I did not know it all. But along the way, I've had some good mentors. And so I recommend that if you do want to get started in real estate, if you haven't done it already, get yourself a mentor before you make the big mistakes. And for $1, I can't imagine a better way to get started and get some strategies and some tactics. And we're going to spend 3 days together. And like I said, I've got some great guest speakers, including Cal, but several other.
You'll probably talk overages there. So.
Oh, cool. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be great. So that's March 12th to 14th, and I'd love to have you all there.
All right. I did put the link there if you guys want to pre-register for that in the chat, and we'll probably send an email out as well. So,
Does anybody have any questions? I want to make sure that if you have anything to do with real estate, it can be tax liens, deeds, like anything to do with real estate, I'm happy to answer it. And like I said, I've got 31 years experience. So whatever, if you're stuck on something that you're doing in real estate, now's your chance to get free mentorship and coaching. And if you guys don't have any questions, then I guess I'll let you enjoy your Thursday night, wherever you're at.
I have a few questions.
Hey, good to see you, Austin. You
Hey,
bet.
Mike. So I was thinking of like different pathways to go with the tax deeds. One of the ways I was thinking is wholetailing. And I remember on the initial summit, you were talking about possibly getting in contact with the previous owner when you do the tax deed, and to have them sign a contract to basically subside that 6-month waiting period, right? What are the odds that you come in contact with the prior owner, and what are the odds from your experience that you're able to get them to sign a contract?
Yeah, so what Austin's referring to is, remember I told you in Texas they have a redemption period that's 6 months. And so let's say you bought that property and you wanted to flip it, and you didn't want to wait that 6 months to do that. So one of the ways to circumvent that is if you can track down the previous homeowner and get, when you get this property, you have all the rights of ownership, and the previous owner loses all the rights of ownership except for one. And that right that they still retain is the right of redemption, and they have 6 months. Now, if you can track them down and they sign a piece of paper saying, hey, we're giving up our rights to redeem this property, then now you don't have to worry about that. That is now removed. And so to answer your question, what are the chances? I mean, it varies. I mean, some people are really easy to track down. It's pretty easy to get the information, you know, who used to own it. Whether or not you can track them down, that's a different story. Sometimes you can find them on social media. Sometimes you can find relatives. I mean, there's different ways to try to track down these people. You can hire a skip tracer to track them down. Depends on how much effort you put into it. And so the chances, it really just depends. Chances of them saying yes are usually really good. If they couldn't afford to stop the property from going to auction in the first place, the chances of them coming up with 25% more money 6 months later, pretty slim. It's not, it rarely will happen. So if you were to go offer them, say, hey, I'm willing to give you $1,000 to waive your right of redemption, to them, that's a lot of money right now because they just lost their home and they probably have no money. And so the chance of them saying yes is very high. Chance of tracking them down really depends on how much effort you put in. But worst case scenario is if you can't track them down, then I'd say put some tenants in the property for 6 months, get some extra revenue from it. And then after, you know, if you sign a 1-year lease, we'll keep them in there for the year. And after the year is up, then go and you know, do your original exit strategy.
yeah, that's what we did with that first example I showed you there, is we had a tenant in for a year. There's also 1 or 2 third-party companies that will go in and they can help you get clear title to the property before that redemption period's over. So they kind of shake the tree and reach out to everyone involved and see if they're going to redeem. And then you can usually sell the property sooner if you use them. But they do cost you money, but it's one option. So.
Yeah, sometimes it's worth it, especially if you know, you want to take that, sell the home quicker, get that money back so you can go to another auction. If that's the only money you have and that's holding you back from going to another auction, getting another property, it's worth paying a little bit extra money to speed up the process. If you have lots of money anyway, then I just turn it into rental, let it, you know, rent it for 6 months or a year. And after that's over, then go and do your original exit. Good question though. Thanks, Austin, for
That makes perfect sense. Another question I have 2 more questions.
Sure, yeah. Well, you're the only one, so you have the whole stage.
The floor, yeah, okay. So understanding that there's a redemption period, right? And you actually do it's called owner financing, correct? If you were to get the tax deed and then you would have put tenants inside of it, or that's an option, right?
Well,
You can owner finance.
Owner financing is a whole different thing. So when you go to sell the property, for example, let's say you bought a property for $10,000 and you put an ad on Craigslist saying home for sale, owner will carry. That means that you're going to be the bank for them. Or if you put, you know, vendor financing, and you could imagine you put an ad that said 10,000 down, no qualifying, owner will carry. So what that means is that somebody's going to give you your $10,000 back, and then let's say the property's worth $100,000. You're going to put a mortgage on there for 90,000. What that means is people, whoever buys it off you, they're going to make payments to you as if they owed you $90,000. They're going to make a monthly payment to you as if you were a bank. And so you just created a note. That's called creating a note. You just created a note out of nowhere. Now somebody owes you $90,000. You've got all your money back, so you can go back to the next auction. And the really cool thing about that strategy, if you do that, is now you've got your 10,000 back. So you go to the next auction, you keep repeating, repeat. And now you create all these notes, and now you have all this passive income coming into you. You keep getting your money back, but now you have all this passive income coming in every month. And if the people don't pay you, you can take the home back. You can foreclose on them and take the property back. So, doing owner financing as a way to sell the property really usually a lot quicker than if you go through regular channels. It's a really good option. Sometimes
you don't have to deal with tenants and repairs and vacancies because they own the property, so the repairs are their problem.
It's their home, exactly. And if you sell it to, let's say, a handyman, they love fixer-uppers, so you can sell it sometimes without doing a single thing to the property because they want to fix it up their way anyway, and they'd rather have some sweat equity. And so there's lots of different things you can do, but that's also a great question and a good point, is that if you do owner financing for the next person, you can really speed up that process too. And you could potentially do a rent to own with them and just put in the contract that, hey, there's still a redemption period on this property. So there's a slight chance the previous owner might come back. And if it does, hey, we'll figure something out for you. We'll put you in a different property. So there's different ways to deal with that, but that's a really good strategy to do owner financing and or rent to own. There's a bunch of different ways to handle that.
Yeah, and that's what I remember too from the initial summit. I remember Cal actually did like a segment on that as well. So in that instance, right, and let's say you do a rent to own as well, and during that 6 months period, let's say the person comes back and you actually already have tenants inside of the property, right? And the previous owner comes and claims the property while you have tenants inside of the property. What do you do in that instance? Do you have to kick out your tenants, or do you have to wait until the end of the lease that you have agreed with them, or how exactly does that work?
Yeah, to be honest, they almost never come back. And I'm usually before I put a tenant in there, I'm usually going to try my best to contact the previous owner. If you're doing the pre-foreclosure strategy, you've already tried to track down the owner even before you bid on it at the auction. And so usually you can kind of check the temperature of where they're at. But in most cases, those people are long gone. They've left the home. They have no attachment to that property anymore, and they're never going to come back. They're not paying attention to what's going on. In a lot of cases, these people have buried their head in the sand unless you manage to track them down. And even when you do, if you leave a message and you try to create a win for them, sometimes they still won't call you back. So quite often they've just kind of checked out, and they're not going. I've never had that actually happen, and none of my students that I'm aware of ever had that happen either.
Marie, would you mind telling your story about how you tracked down that one owner in South America? You're muted right now, but I don't know if you want to, but I know you went to great lengths to track down one of the previous owners, didn't you?
Yes, it was a property that I got at auction in Dallas. And so I was trying to track down the previous owners, hopefully to get them to relinquish their right of redemption. And I went to the, I located the property, a relative, and I went and saw the one person, and they told me that the previous owner, okay, it was a husband and wife situation. There was a divorce. The husband had been kicked out of the country, and he was back in El Salvador. And so, of course, in Texas, it's got to be a joint thing, husband and wife. So the wife was happy. She went to the notary with me and signed off. And then the question was, okay, well, where's the husband? So I asked her, I says, well, do you know where your husband is? And so she told me, and I says, well, does he have any relatives? And she said, well, actually, his sister lives next door. Of course, they weren't on speaking terms, but so I went and knocked on the door next door. She answered, and she was very accommodating. She gave me the phone number of the ex, the husband, who was in El Salvador. And so I called El Salvador and happened to get him on the phone. And miracle of miracles, I told him I had bought his house. And he said, "Oh, well, do you want me to sign anything?" And I said, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, if you could." And I sent him the file. He printed it out. He went to the American consulate, signed it off, sent it back. And of course, I told him, if you do this, I will compensate you. And he was very appreciative for the compensation. And consequently, I was able to
Get around the redemption.
get around the right of redemption.
Awesome. That's really
Yeah,
good.
it was really quite the story.
No kidding. But that's what I mean. Sometimes you have to go a little bit dig a little bit further to track down these people. They're not always waiting for you to call them, but they're, you know, if you can get a hold of them, they're usually very, you know, especially if you're offering them some sort of compensation, they're very happy to hear from you at that point.
And oftentimes I found is their heirs, because the previous owners often are deceased and the heirs don't have money to pay for the taxes, let alone the renovations that are needed on the house. So if you can track down the heirs, I've been successful doing that as well.
That's great. Yeah, it's good to see you, by the way, Marie.
Hey, it's good to see you as well.
Glad you're crushing it out there. Is the Dallas auction open now?
Dallas, no, but I've been going to some of the smaller counties around.
Oh, good. Might have to start looking at some of those, because maybe I'll have to use that for training during COVID, if I can get you know, people going on airplanes. We'll have to see how
There
people
you go.
react to that. All right. Any other questions? Austin, any more?
One question, Mike.
Hi there. You bet.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Thank you.
And I have a quick question. So let's say you bought the property, you won the auction, and you did the rehab and you put a tenant. This is a good strategy instead of selling to do the burst strategy? Keep the property, refinance, let's say 75 to 80% or less, depends on the FI, and use that money, you know, go and do other auctions.
Yeah, that's a great strategy too. The one challenge with Texas, my two main states that I invest in, I invest in Texas, and then I also invest in Atlanta, Georgia. And Atlanta, Georgia, the property taxes are a whole lot less and the insurance is a whole lot less. And so all things being equal, I get to keep a lot more of the money that I make from rent in Atlanta. So I actually have a turnkey operation there. We sell properties that are fixed up in Atlanta. And the reason I picked Atlanta, originally when I went to Texas, the reason I learned tax deeds in the first place is originally I thought that's going to be how I acquire these properties. I'll fix them up, put tenants in place, and then I'll sell them to investors like I do in Atlanta. But when I realized that, okay, going to the auction, I might get a property here and a couple there. Well, we've sold 1,100 homes in Atlanta in the last 9 years, and I can't get that kind of volume from those auctions. So the reason I tell you this, though, is that the other downside to Texas is that the property tax and the insurance are higher, so the ROI is lower. So if you do the burst strategy, it'll still work, but you won't get a lot of cash flow after that. However, if you bought the property low enough, you might have a lot more cash than when you started. So you kind of have to have the balance between those two things. And the other thing you have to realize is when you're buying properties at these auctions, it's hard to get title insurance at first. It's going to take you a little while to get that title insurance, because if you're buying off the MLS, there's a lot of checks and balances. It's very, very safe. Right. When you're buying at the auction, title companies don't really understand, most real estate investors don't understand how these auctions work, let alone title companies. And so quite often you have to jump through a few hoops to get that title insurance. And until you get the title insurance, it's hard to get a mortgage on it. And so it's a great strategy as long as you know that you're not going to buy it for $10,000, then the next day pull $80,000 out. This is something that might take you 6 months or a year, maybe even 2 years to do, but it's a great strategy. You know, if you have the ability to wait for the seasoning period, and the burst strategy is really great, especially when you're buying properties for pennies on the dollar. But most of the time, the banks, even if you got a smoking deal on the MLS, let alone an auction, most banks will base what they lend you on what you paid for it. until it's past
Okay.
that seasoning period, which is anywhere, depending on the bank, anywhere from 6 months to a year, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on the bank.
Makes sense. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. But great idea. I like the way you think. Anybody else?
Yeah, that was kind of my question as well. So that
Oh,
answers
okay.
that. But I just thought of another question.
Okay.
Have you actually had any experience? Because I know there's like there's different like states and counties that there are specific deed like states, right?
Yeah, there's some states that are strictly deeds, and so there's none of this redemption period stuff. Now, the reason I like Texas is when things are a little bit more complicated, it gets rid of some of your competitors. Some people want to do they want the low hanging fruit. They want to do the bare bones minimum. And when you go to Texas, imagine you're an institutional investor and you've got, millions of dollars worth of other people's money, and you're going to these auctions. It's a pain in the butt if it's not clear cut. Am I going to own this property? Is this person going to come back and redeem it? They just want easy. And so they're going to go to those straight deed states because it's really super easy. If you're the winner, you own that property. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's over. So I find that those states tend to be more competitive. It's not to say that you can't do them. If I were thinking I wanted to do tax deeds full time, well, it only takes place like in Texas. It's on the first Tuesday of the month. You got 29 other days where you could be doing deals, either other tax deeds or other strategies. And so if it was me, and let's say I was in a transition time right now, and let's say I lost my job due to COVID, and I'm thinking, hey, this is what I want to do. This is exciting me. It's lighting me up. Well, yeah, I'm going to go do the Texas auctions on the first Tuesday of the month. And then I'm going to find other auctions that are going on those other 29 days. And some of them are going to be straight deed states. Some might be redeemable deeds. So if I'm only doing one, then for me, I'm going to pick Texas. If I'm trying to make a career of just this one strategy, then I'm going to go and find out a whole, some other counties where there's good opportunities, and some of them will be straight deeds. And if you can find one that's not too competitive and where there's a reasonable amount of supply and you can get some good deals, absolutely. So I'm not saying that the auction I go to is the only good auction in the whole United States. That's not true. But if I can only pick one, I'm going to go somewhere where it's kind of got that a reasonable supply of properties. The auction takes place frequently. Like the Kansas one was only once a year. So if you wait for that one auction and you don't get anything, you got a whole year before your next auction. And so you got to balance it depending on how much time you have. But if you put in the effort and you start researching and attending more auctions and building teams, this could be extremely lucrative. So, but if you're only picking one, I'd recommend going somewhere where there's good supply, frequent auctions, and not too much competition, comparatively. Now, there's going to be competition at every auction. I've never seen an auction where you're the only person there. Actually, I shouldn't say that. When I first started investing in Vegas during the big recession, when I first started going there were like a handful of us, that would show up at this auction. And then as time went on, it went from maybe 5 of us, then it became 10, then it became 20, and then it became like this parking lot was filled to the brim. You could barely get in there. So right now there's a lot of people fearful when these auctions open up. I think a lot of people are going to be scared. A lot of people are going to, be out of work. And so I think for a little while, we're going to be able to cherry pick a little bit more. And as time goes on, people are going to catch on that, hey, why was I being scared? Look at this opportunity. So that's the advantage to training yourself right now. Even though the auctions aren't open yet, but starting to learn this stuff and have this stuff on your radar, by the time they do open, it'll give you a competitive advantage if you're not trying to figure it out then. You want to start learning your different strategies as early as possible and be ready for what's coming down the pipeline here.
Yeah, and I know people that have had success in Georgia at the tax deed sales and in California. So I think we like Texas. One of the reasons because if they redeem, you get 25% too. That's another reason, right?
Yeah, and in Georgia, you get I believe it's 30%, but it's a 1-year redemption. And my understanding, I haven't done the auctions there, but what I heard, and I haven't verified it because Texas keeps me, there's plenty there. But I've heard that you can't actually do anything to that property during that year. You can't rent it, you can't rehab it. And so that doesn't really thrill me, having my money tied up for a whole year and not be able to do anything unless you can track down, the owner and get them to relinquish their right of redemption. So I haven't really done anything there. In Atlanta, we're buying mostly, bulk properties from the bank. So we have a different strategy there. But, just because I haven't done my research on it, and I'm just going from hearsay from other people, that I would still, if somebody's interested, I would definitely research that. But I don't know if that auction's open yet either. Haven't looked.
Not Fulton County, which is
Okay.
but
Yeah.
these surrounding counties are. Yeah.
Hmm. Any other questions?
One more question.
Sure. That's good to have you here, Austin. Austin, by the way, is 22 years old, and he's my youngest student in my year-long group coaching program. And this guy is a go-getter. I'm very proud of him. So I'm glad you have all your questions.
Okay, so what is the actual best way to research these, like, because what I'm interested in too is that like you're saying, kind of like the low-hanging fruit. I like wholesaling a lot. Ideally, my idea is to get into wholesaling, grab the low-hanging fruit to build like more of an empire as far as go into flipping and then buying and hold. So what I'm thinking is possibly researching these like different states that actually have deeds rather than like this redemption period, so I can just instantly like either flip it or just do whatever I decide to do with it. What is the best way to research these different states that have actual like full-on deeds, and what are the best ways to like find out more information on particular counties in the auctions, like when they go on, how often, what kind of the rules there are?
Yeah, usually you want to call the county assessor's office, is usually where you can get information on that. And they all publish it in different ways. So, Texas, they or at least in Houston, they publish it online. Other places, some places you have to pay for the list. Most places it's free. But if you call the county and say, listen, when do you do your tax deed auctions? How often? What are the payments that are allowed? Because, in Houston, you have to pay for the property immediately. Like if you're the high bidder, you bid 10,000, you have to have that 10,000 on you. You can't say, oh, I'm going to go to the bank, I'll be right back. You have to physically have it on you. And if you don't, they will ban you from that auction forever. So other places, I've heard that there's places where you can actually go and potentially finance a property. They give you 30 days to go, come up with the money. And so they all handle it differently. So you want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. Now, if you're doing the pre-foreclosure, and this will answer Nicole's question, what is a pre-foreclosure? Pre-foreclosure is a property that the process has started. The bank has either started the foreclosure process or the county has already started the foreclosure process, but the owner still owns the property. They still have the ability to sell it to you potentially, or pay off the arrears and stop the foreclosure. So they haven't lost it. Foreclosure is when the bank actually now owns the property, or where the county owns the property. Pre-foreclosure, the person still owns the home. And so when you're dealing with pre-foreclosure, that's a great strategy for wholesaling. These are people that are in major trouble. They have a very short timeline and they're looking for solutions. And so if you can track these people down, you can come up with a win for them and a win for you and get paid for it. So to answer your question, you have to check with the different counties because they all publish that information differently, but they all have some way of getting the list to you. So I would check with the different counties that you're interested in, and they'll figure out how to get the list, and then start either getting on the phone and trying to track down these people, or send them something through the mail. The stuff that worked really well for me when I used to send out my foreclosure fixers flyers that said I can help stop the foreclosure, I got a way better response than when I sent out We Buy Homes postcards, which I did before that. So find something that really works, but make sure if you're sending out something that says we can help stop the foreclosure, that always go there with the intention of helping the person who on the other end first. Come up with the best solution for them. Even if you could have made more money doing a different strategy, you could have made more money for yourself. Always come up with a solution that's there to help them first. And if you do that, you're going to have more business than you know what to do, than you know how to handle. Because like I said, people that have lost their jobs, if the business they worked for shut down, they know a whole bunch of other people that lost their jobs. And when you start getting people referring, people to you 5 at a time, 10 at a time, you're going to start to make a lot of money and be able to help a lot of people. So, you're more than welcome to copy my marketing and send out, we can help stop the foreclosure. Take the time though to learn the foreclosure laws. just, hire an attorney, speak to them for a couple of hours, learn the foreclosure laws, and then come up with, and I can help you with that, but come up with several different solutions depending on, where the people are at in the foreclosure process. All right, any more questions? Excuse me.
Thanks. Thank you, Mike.
Oh,
And
you're
thank you,
welcome.
Cal. I look forward to the actual training for the tax deeds.
Me too. I can't wait.
So
I
fun.
can't wait till things are open again. We can hopefully all get together as a group and learn together in real life and be there together. I'm looking forward to those days.
Yeah, nothing beats actually going to those properties and just seeing them and looking inside and hearing what Mike has to say as far as repairs, and just being there is so much better than being on a Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm really hoping that 2021 is the year we can do that. But who knows? We're all at the mercy of something that we have no control over. So looking to buy another home and looking at pre-foreclosure and foreclosure. Yeah, those are both great ways to get good deals on properties. And there's gonna be a lot of that, I believe, probably the second half of this year. There'll be tons of them, maybe sooner. Any other questions? Austin, any questions?
Actually, I do have one more question.
Knew it. I knew I could get one more.
Okay, so I'm just a little bit. I understand the whole concept around the foreclosure. So is the tactic that you would use? Would you bail them out in the sense of you would give them the money, and then if that didn't work out, you would offer to buy the property cash from them, or what? I mean, how does that work? You know what I get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So there's going to be a different answer depending on the position and resources of the person trying to do the strategy. So if you said, "Hey, Mike, I got a couple million sitting in my bank. I don't know what to do with it. It's burning a hole in my pocket." Then I say, "Yeah, you can just pay cash for the property, fix it, flip it." First, like I said, we're always going to look at an option that works for the person that's in trouble first. So if there's somebody that had a perfect track record, they always made their payments on time, and then COVID hit, they lost their job, and all of a sudden, for the first time ever, they missed a payment, and now they're working again. Then yeah, the first thing I'm going to look at is, okay, they're 5,000 or 10,000 arrears. Well, I'll lend them that 5 or 10,000. They're of course going to pay me some interest on top of that, and they're going to also sign. And I'm very transparent. I say, nobody in their right mind is going to loan you money. You're in arrears. I'm the only one crazy enough to loan you money when you're in arrears. No bank, nobody else is going to loan you, give you cash. So I need you to sign. They're going to sign what's called a quitclaim deed. And the quitclaim deed basically says that if they don't pay me, then I'm not going to have to go through the foreclosure process to foreclose on them. I'm going to basically be able to take that property right away without having to go through the process. So I'm going to be very transparent. I'm going to tell them this is how it works. And otherwise, I'm not willing to give somebody money if I have to, chase after them to collect, and that's not going to happen. So that'll be my first, first thing I would do if it's a relatively small amount of money is I do that. Now, if that's not going to work, and like I said, there's two types of people. There's people that sometimes bad things happen to good people. If they're one of those, then yeah, I'm going to try to lend the money, help them stay in their home. Or I might say, hey, you know what? Why are you letting the bank take your home? Why don't we fix it? I'll put up the cash. I know you don't have the cash. I'll put up the cash. We'll sell it, and I'll take some of the profit because I'm taking some risk here, and you'll walk away with some money. Or if it's somebody who I know doesn't have the ability to repay me, maybe they lost their job and they're still not working, so they don't have the ability to pay me back. Well, then maybe I'm going to buy their home for cash. But let's say I'm just starting out and I don't have cash. Then I'm going to put it under contract, and then I'm going to wholesale it. I'm going to find another investor, let them do the deal, and I'm going to get paid to assign that deal to them. So it really depends on the resources that you have. If you have a lot of cash, then it might make more sense to flip it instead of wholesale it. And if you don't have any cash or very little, wholesaling is a great strategy. Another one is subject to, if they had a mortgage on there, and instead of paying all cash for the home, you can just pay off the arrears, take over the existing mortgage, and then get into that deal for a lot less money. So there's a whole bunch of different potential strategies that you could do, but it all starts with tracking down this distressed homeowner and coming up with a solution that works for them. And I promise you, if you do that, even if you take a little bit less on each deal than you would have if you would have gone for that home run, they're going to send you their friends. You're going to make a lot more money in the long run. And I just believe in karma. I think a lot of great things, you'll just kind of get in the flow and deals will just magically fall in your lap all the time. So it's not very scientific, but that's what I've had happen to me. And I know the people that are the most caring about the people on the other end of that transaction, they're the most successful real estate investors out there. They always do the best. Any other questions? I know Austin's gonna have one more. I know it.
Okay, one more.
All right. There we go.
Okay, the last question, I promise.
I
So
want more.
in that instance where you say that you go with the person, you say, hey, we can actually fix up your property and sell it. I assume that there's a contract that you write, right? So would you just go to like a real estate attorney and then you can write up some contract where you guys agree, or what exactly in your experience did you do?
Yeah. So the first time you do a deal like that, yes, get an attorney to write it up. But then after that, you can use the same. I mean, next time you do a deal that's very similar in nature, just rinse and repeat. Use that exact same contract. So it's not like every time I do a deal, I'm going to go to the lawyer to have it drafted. I'm going to have it done one time just to make sure that it's legal and protecting myself and the person on the other end too, for that matter. But it's actually it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, you could. In reality, I'm not going to tell you to not go use a lawyer, but it's a pretty simple contract. It's just going to say, I, Mike Wolf, am investing X amount in this property. We're doing a joint venture together, and here's what I expect to get out of it after we sell it. And then I'm going to register it against the property so that after it sells, the title company or the lawyer will know that I have an interest in the property, so I get paid. And it's super simple. But if you're brand new to this and you've never done it, first time, get a lawyer to write it up for you. It'll cost you a couple of dollars, but then just use that contract over and over and over again.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
I had a real estate, a friend who did the same thing. They wrote the contract, but she was, she's an agent. She disclosed that, and the owner sued her because it was a conflict of interest with being a real estate licensee. So how would you write the contract where, of course you have to disclose that you're a real estate licensee, but isn't that a conflict of interest? Because as a licensee, you should provide advice to sell for the most instead of,
I would, yeah, if I was a licensed realtor like you are, I would definitely not only disclose, I would have a lot of extra paperwork saying that, we discussed different options. One of them was you could list on the MLS. You might even get more money on the MLS. But so I put everything, I make sure everything was very specific and in writing because these days everybody wants to sue everybody, especially somebody who's in a really bad financial situation. The easiest thing to do is to sue and get money from a realtor. And so I'd be very, very careful. I'd make sure that you disclose everything. And, a lot of these people don't want to list with a realtor. They don't want people walking through their home. So you want to have them sign something saying, hey, I offered option A, B, and C. You picked option B. And so that way they can't come back and say you took advantage of them or that you didn't give them other options. You showed them. And so I'd be very, very specific as to what we talked about. I might even record it, just be extra safe. But yeah, people are always going to try to sue if they're, in a really really low point in their life financially. They're that's, and if you're a realtor, makes you a target for sure. So be very, very specific what you have in writing. Maybe even record it, let them know, like have your phone right on the table and say, hey, I'm recording this. And so they know they can't come back because the whole conversation is right there and there's no disputing it.
Okay. And that should be on wholesale contracts as well. If you wholesale and you're a licensee, you should disclose that as well.
If I was a realtor, I would protect myself as I would go way overboard on protecting myself because the real estate board never stands up. I mean, they're there to protect the public from realtors. And so the real estate board will almost never stand up for you. And you're always going to end up on the bad side of that transaction. So I would go way overboard. I'd record every conversation. I'd put everything in writing.
But isn't there different laws for recording? Like, don't you have to get the consent of the homeowner to record?
I would get consent. I would say, listen, and I would actually record them saying that they're aware that you're recording. So
because I know in California you have to get consent, but other states it just has to be one person couldn't record,
Yeah.
and the other one doesn't have to consent. Depends on the state, you know?
I'm not a lawyer, but I would get consent. I'd say, hey, to protect both of us, I'm recording this so that, you know, we both know exactly what we discussed here today. And then there's no way to dispute it. It's right there. And then I would still get them to sign saying, hey, I offered you these different options. This is the option that you picked. And therefore, you know, you got no recourse. If you know, 'cause what I find is when people are in a really bad situation, you know, they really just want that problem solved ASAP. And if the quickest thing means less money, sometimes they just want this, you know, it feels like to them, it feels like they have this big weight on their shoulders. They just want to be done with it. And then when they're in a better position down the road, all of a sudden they look back and they want to blame somebody that, oh, well, this guy took advantage of me. So they love you when they're in that bad position because you're the solution. Down the road, they look at you as, oh, you took advantage of me when I was down. So you have to really, really protect yourself. And if you're licensed, you have to extra protect yourself. So I would just be very cautious. I would record everything. I would go overboard on the paperwork and have them sign off on everything. But the good news is I know a lot of realtors that are very successful at being real estate investors as well. And a lot of them make more money on the investment side of things than they do on actually doing their realtor stuff. So that's the good news. And you know, I'm an ex-realtor too, so I'm actually speaking from experience. I actually gave up my license because that way I didn't have to deal with all that extra paperwork. I wasn't buying stuff off the MLS anyway. When I originally got my license, I thought, oh, it'd be great to have access to the comparables and you know, I'd get insider, you know, I'd have insider information, find properties that were way under value. I almost, and I know you can, but I rarely bought stuff off the MLS. I occasionally did, but not very many. I find most of the best deals I've got were off market. So, you know, so I'm not saying drop your license yet, but once we get you very successful as an investor, at some point you may or may not want to keep that license because it does add some more liability to you for sure.
Yeah, I think just in general, whatever strategy you're doing, find an attorney that does that type of deal and just get them to look over your contracts. And I mean, whether you're an agent or not, just tell them your situation and then they can just make sure that you're covered, you've got the right language in your contract. And then whatever disclosures you need to make, they'll guide you in the best way so that you're covered every time. So.
Austin or anybody else have a question? I love Austin. I wish I was that smart when I was 22. This guy, like he tunes into everything. He's always learning and then he goes and applies. That's so cool. Austin is silent. Anybody else?
Hey, Mike, this is Subanan. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. This is sort of a rudimentary question. Does one have to register with an auction to make a bid? How does that process work?
Each auction is different. Yes, you do. But in some you have to do it in advance. The Harris County, which is Houston, the Harris County auction, you can show up literally, you walk into the convention center where the auction takes place. You go sign up right then and there. They give you a bidding card, and then you're in the system for a whole year, and you're good. There's others where you have to actually, and I know San Antonio, you have to actually register in advance. So check with whatever county you're looking to do this in and make sure that, the last thing you want to do is show up there and not be registered and find out you can't bid. So check with the county beforehand just to make sure you know exactly what's required. But every county is different, and that's why you always have to check.
Sounds good. Austin asked a lot of great questions and you answered some of mine as well. I had another question about those two favorite auctions you had mentioned earlier in this call. Is there a specific reason that you like those two auctions?
Well, the auctions that I like all involve, it's always a balance between one, how many properties are there? What's the competition like? How often are the auctions? So for example, if there was an auction that I loved in Topeka, like Cal did, is that what's called Topeka, Kansas? Well, that's only once a year. So it might be the best auction on the planet, but there's 364 days besides that one day of the auction that if you're going to be broke. So, it's always a balance. I would, if I was going to do this full time, if this was my full-time career was just tax deeds, then I would find out, who does auctions when, and I would probably bounce all over the country, just going from auction to auction to auction to auction. But for me, I like I look for places with good inventory, frequent auctions, and competition that I can outmaneuver them and, you know, have a fighting chance to get properties. Because there's some auctions out there that, you know, the auctions are frequent. There's lots of inventory, but there's institutional investors there with billions of dollars, literally, and you can't compete against them. There's also auctions. I remember back in the day, these weren't tax deeds, these were foreclosure auctions, but we used to try to go to the auctions in Phoenix. After Las Vegas, we did really well at those auctions. We went to Phoenix and we thought we would duplicate it. And what ended up happening is there's kind of a cartel that runs those auctions, and they've been on everything, even stuff they don't want, just so you know you don't have a chance of getting a property. So we quickly learned that we're not going to get properties there. There was good supply, nice properties, but there's no chance of us getting anything because these guys, they were fierce. And so we ended up doing short sales instead. We had to do a whole different strategy there. So, you know, it's kind of a combination, but those are the main things that I look for, is just really supply, frequency of auction, and competition. Those are my main things. And in general, though, when you go to places that are more complicated, like having that redemption period, that throws a lot of people off. They don't know how to deal with it. And so it gets rid of them. They go to places that are easier. So that's been my experience. Cal, what's been your experience? I don't know how many different auctions you've tried out. I haven't really, you know, I discovered this one, loved it, and I didn't really go and explore a whole lot more because I just found it worked. It just worked for me.
Yeah, like I have talked to people that find the smaller counties that have decent populations can be good. So you're looking at, you know, not your big metropolitan giants like I don't know, Georgia, Los Angeles, or sorry, Georgia, you know, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Houston, Dallas, but some of the smaller surrounding areas have a little bit less competition, but they still have consistent auctions either every month or every couple months. And then, like you said, like, for example, that Topeka auction, I would probably do that one again, but again, it's only once a year. But if you had a couple of those sweet ones that you do once a year and just set your calendar, that's a great strategy. And we went to that auction and there was hardly anyone there. And that's the capital city of that entire state. So sometimes you just have to dig around and maybe try some or talk to people that have been, and you might be able to find some of your own little, carve out your own little niche.
Very cool. Any other questions? I see the wheels turning in Austin's head. I think there's going to be one brewing.
Oh, hey
Question.
guys, it's Karen from
Hey,
Karen from Austin. It's not
Good.
Austin, but it's Karen from Austin.
Karen from Austin.
Yeah.
It's good to kind of see you, at least a picture of you.
Yeah, I know. I'm walking my dog, so it's dark and you won't see me anyway. So, well, I'm just sort of just a conversation thing. I just read an article about Topeka, Kansas is actually trying to lure homeowners to come live there, buy homes and live there, and they're going to pay you up to $10,000. Did you hear anything about that? And
I haven't heard that, but I like that. I'll move there for a day and then turn it into a rental property. I like that.
I'm sure there's some contractual things about, you know,
I haven't heard that, but what about you? Have you heard anything, Cal?
No, I haven't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I can't remember. We just read this somewhere, but you know, my moneymaker is Airbnb, and I rent my own house, and it's doing very well actually. Even during COVID, people are still renting weekends. So and I just got my refi. 9 months in the making. My refi came through. My cash out refi.
Congratulations.
So I've just paid off.
Oh, that's so good. Well,
it was so painful, and I'm still waiting for all the credit cards to clear, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I feel like, okay, now I'm ready to take your course. But, you know, of course, I've been in it almost a year now.
Yeah, you get to do the tax deed training because that's included. So once that auction opens up, I'm looking forward to teaching you this. So, or maybe sooner, we might have to do it on Zoom. We'll just have to see what transpires with this crazy virus.
Yeah, or both. We'll do a Zoom, and then when we can, we'll do a live one.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get you trained one way or another. The only thing I can't control is when they open that auction. So even if I talk, the auction's not open, not much we can do with it. But it's Texas. They usually push things pretty. You know, they'll do it as quick as they can, and I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah. So the other thing is, my husband, my partner, my boyfriend is pushing me to buy a property that we can Airbnb, that we can stay in part-time as well as Airbnb, which makes sense to me because that's what I do now with
Yeah.
my own home. Come on, Ellie. My dog won't come. He's trying to busy street. So, you know, my issue now that I've got 2 homes and 2 mortgages that are starting over at 30 years, but at a nice low APR, there's no way a bank is going to lend me any more money for any more homes. So as an investor, what is your take on being a lender to someone who wants to short-term rental the property?
Well, I have an even better strategy for you. And I think she's going to be speaking on my March 12th to 14th event, but I know a lot of people that do Airbnbs, they don't own the Airbnbs. So one of the things you'll learn as long you're in this industry is sometimes it's better just to control something than to own it. And so imagine you found somebody who's, you know, they've got their home up for rent right now, and they just finally somehow managed to get rid of that tenant that wasn't paying, even though they're not supposed to. But in any case, they're sick of being a landlord, and you approach them and say, "Listen, you know what? I want to rent your property. I'm willing to sign a 2-year lease or 3-year lease on your property. You will never miss rent, but I want the ability to sublease it, and so you're not actually going to buy the property. You're gonna lease it for X amount per month, and then you're going to rent it out for short term. And quite often, if you're in a place like Austin, for example, you can rent out that property on a short-term basis for a lot more than you get renting it for the whole month. And so you're going to control the property. You're not going to actually go buy it. And that takes a lot of the risk out of it, because you're also going to put clauses in there saying, you know, for some reason I'm struggling to rent it, then I can, you know, terminate the lease early or whatever. There's different things you can put in there to protect yourself, but it's a lot less risky than actually buying the home and then seeing if, you know, is this property rentable short-term or not. So I would do that, because there's really no limit to how many properties you can have if you're not buying them, if you're doing that option instead. And I think that's safer than going, you know, borrowing money and having this payment that you got to make. I'd rather be paying rent, but have the ability to, in the unlikely event that you can't rent it, like if you're doing well now during COVID in Austin, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to have trouble with anything else in Austin either. And so, so that's what I would do. And I can also put you in touch with my friend who does this. I have actually several friends that do this. I'll put you in touch with them, and they'll explain exactly how they do it. But they're also going to be teaching at the March event, which of course, since you're in my program, you get free tickets. So, or you don't even have to pay the $1. So
yeah. I've heard some of these trainings. I've just been reluctant to well, I guess I've been waiting for my refi to go through, because I didn't have anything to offer, even as a rent payment right now. So now I do.
Yeah, and now you do. And my people will train you and teach you the ins and outs, and I'll put you in touch with some people that can help you with all that. And you won't even have to go buy any property. So that's the best part of it.
By chance, are any of your people outside of Canada?
I actually know somebody who is in California.
Okay, I think I remember him. He spoke before. I can't remember his name.
He hasn't spoken for me yet. I've got a buddy that does it in Amsterdam. I've got somebody who does it in Canada. And I was just chatting today with this person, and he lives in California, but he's doing these Airbnbs mostly in the Phoenix area.
Yeah, because right now what I'm doing is I'm renting my house out every weekend, which is great, but I don't have a place to stay, so I'm going to my cabin, and that means that place cannot be rented out. So I'm kind of I'm going for the bigger egg basket, but still I'm taking away from the other basket.
Yeah, well, a lot of these people who do this with renting and subleasing, a lot of them control 10, 20, 30 properties. It's very easy to build that up when you're not having to come up with the cash to buy them. And so you're only just really limited by the amount of effort that you want to put in. And as long as you can keep them rented, and I'm sure, you can always keep one vacant for yourself. It's a great strategy. So it's a great, Airbnb in Austin is phenomenal. And like I said, if you're doing well now, it's only going to get better when COVID disappears. So.
Yeah, I'm turning down people that want to rent my house for a month or 2 at a time, because I don't have anywhere to go, and until they lift up travel, and then I'll go to Spain. But,
there you go. I'll join you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah,
I'm
good to
glad
hear
I
from you.
caught this.
Glad your refi went through. That's great, Karen. Awesome.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll look forward to the next visit, the next class.
Sounds good. Any
Mhm.
other questions? Austin has been so quiet.
So I have a logistics kind of question.
Sure.
Obviously I live in California, hopefully not for too much longer. But I started an LLC here just recently, and I plan on doing business outside real estate business outside of California, more than likely in Texas. So in that instance, until I move there, as well, I'm going to be getting into virtual wholesaling because the San Diego market's really hard.
Yeah.
And I want to be like into more, I basically want to make money quicker, even if it's smaller quantities, so I can just build up my capital so I can do fix and flips or whatever I decide to do with it. But what my question is that when I invest in other states and I do wholesaling in other states, do I have to do my taxes here in California through my LLC here in California, or do I have to create an LLC in those states where I'm doing business at?
Okay, so that's definitely a question for a professional accountant, because I'm not an accountant, not a lawyer. But I'll tell you that in some cases it makes sense to set up a whole new corporation in the state you're doing business in. In some cases, you just have to register with the Secretary of State. You can do it out of state. I don't know what the tax implications are, and I know that living in California, the taxes are very high, and in Texas, it's the opposite from a state income tax perspective. I don't know. I know we have Michael Matthew, who's an accountant, but he's in Canada. I don't know if you have any American accountants on here. But anyway, you definitely want to check with a professional, because I don't want to give you advice and then end up costing you a lot of money in taxes. So definitely talk to a professional. If you send me an email, I can connect you. If you don't know anybody, I can connect you to somebody you can talk to. But that's definitely something that I'm not really qualified to answer, but there's definitely people who can help you with that, and I can connect you to them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions? Or Cal, any other comments, or should we wrap it up? Or
Yeah, no, I think I'm good for comments, but this has been a great turnout. Appreciate everyone that's come on and stuck around the entire time, which is amazing. So yeah, unless anyone has anything else, I guess we can wrap it up.
well, it's been fun. You guys have been a good group, and some great questions from the people that are asking questions.
Yeah, and we'll post the recording. We'll send an email to everyone with the recording of this, and I'll also post it in our Facebook group, so you guys can watch it again if you need to.
All right. Well, Cal, thanks so much for having me. And
yeah, thanks for being on here, Mike.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always fun. I can talk about real estate all day long. I don't know if you noticed that, but
yeah, I think we all kind of noticed that. It's awesome.
Never gets old.
Good though. It's always packed with value.
I love it. Real estate's been very good to me, and I know that everybody here, if you're on the fence thinking about doing real estate, it's a great time coming up to do it. Right now, it's still a great time, but there's not that much inventory, but that is going to change drastically really soon.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining. And again, if you think of any questions, you can reach out in the Facebook group. I know, Mike, you're actually a member of my group, so you can reach out that way, or even just reply to the email you get with the follow-up link, and then I can make sure Mike gets the question, or I can answer it, whichever. So we can make sure you got everything that you need there. So, Mike, thanks a lot. Back to the casino for you.
Good to see you, buddy. Good to see everybody.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.